Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. My name is Eric, joined by Raul, my co-creator, co-commentator, co-caster, co-compatriot here, and we're back for the last episode in the two-episode series here.
hmm
A couple tips to go from intermediate to advanced. This will be coming out second week of Pro Quests, right up until your second and third weekend. So hopefully the first Pro Quest went well. But in case maybe it didn't go as well and you wanted to improve or you just want to improve in general, we have a couple more advanced tips that'll help players that have been playing for a little bit, or maybe they haven't been looking to play at higher level competitive events on a more regular basis to improve your skills. So I'm going to be starting with, so we have 3 points for you. I'm going to be starting with the first point here is how to, this is a bit of a combination. It's how to pitch stack, but relative to how to pitch stack, looking at your draw timings, thinning your decks, and second, third cycle. They all kind of intercorrelate with each other. And what I mean by that is learning how to pitch stack properly. Getting an example in here is something like playing Bravo or playing Oldhim, where these decks very commonly get to second cycle. Sometimes you just have like these really like ineffective hands where you're just swinging hammer and stuff like that, but you can't really push any meaningful damage here. So you're pitch stacking either for like a rouse the ancient. So what you're doing is you're pitch stacking a blue, you're pitch stacking two attack axes, and you could reveal to rouse, and then you're pitch stacking the rouse. So what you're able to do is guarantee that your rouse coming up in second and third cycle will be able to be properly, probably properly revealed to. And if you're able to do that for the entirety or more of your second or third cycle through your deck, you're able to string together so much pressure that you'll hopefully be able to close out a game or at the very least grab some tempo in your game. For Bravo, very similar that you're pitch stacking three blues and a crippling crush, for example. So you're able to Bravo dominate turn after turn with a big attack, and you're able to close out the very ends of the game. Otherwise, it's just going to end up having a higher chance of going to fatiguing, where you don't have any cards left in your deck, and there's not really much you can do. The last kind of example here is Kano. So what Kano is able to do is stack cards such as Blazing Aether, right? Aether Wildfire, really these key combo pieces. And that's where the other term where I said thinning your deck comes into play. By Kano, you want to be blocking with these non-combo pieces so that you're really left with your Wildfire, sorry, on top, or in the, or usually it's in the arsenal. You Striders it out, and you have a Blazing Aether on top. Maybe you draw one, you Ragamuffins one to be right under it, and you're gonna be single or double Aether Wildfire into double Blazing Aether, single Aether Wildfire into double Blazing Aether to really take the game at that given point. So it's a combination of learning how to remember how you're stacking your cards for the second cycle. And the best way of doing this, I would say, is play some of these decks that have more of the upside from second and third cycle from the deck, and you'll be able to increase kind of your awareness of not only what you're doing during the game, but also what you're doing later in the game and what you're setting up. And that'll be able to kind of push through that last remaining bit of health from your opponent.
The second point we're going to bring up is pivoting. So you may have heard the term being thrown around a little bit, but I'm going to be talking about it from the lens of pivoting from an offensive strategy to defensive, and then vice versa, pivoting between going from a defensive strategy into an offensive one. Pivoting is a useful tool at some point during the game where you kind of pick up on cues and clues that your opponent might be slowing down a little bit, or you can pick up on clues that they're kind of going a little bit hammer or more ham than they should be. So pivoting is really good to put yourself in an in an advantageous situation comparable to what your opponent's doing. So for example, if you're playing Briar, the main goal is to try to get Channel Mount Heroic. So you typically start out the deck or the game a little slower. You utilize a single attack action card with a single non-attack action card, get Rosetta Thorn off, and typically utilize the Embodiment of Earth to get some more value on your block. Your turn to turn is going to be pretty slow in comparison to the opponent, but once you draw Channel Mount, you might be thinking to pivot into a more offensive strategy, playing Channel Mount the turn before, and then keeping a 5 card hand to get a lot more value off your attack action cards. On the flip side, if you're playing a Guardian, for example, Oldhim or Bravo, and you start the game kind of going more offensively, you have the opponent on the back foot, you're playing Crippling Crush, you're playing Spinal Crush, all that good stuff, and you're noticing that the opponent is starting to block with a lot of their strong cards, right? They're bigger damage threats. You might be thinking this might be a good time to pivot into a more defensive strategy and then aim to fatigue the opponent, knowing that if they lose their damage threats, they're not going to be able to put enough damage to close the game late game. This is useful because you're going to try to get your opponent to lose any windows of opportunity that they have to come back if you switch more defensively. So pivoting is a great tool just to change your game plan a little bit, to give yourself an edge later in the game when you pick up on, subtle hints that your opponent might be changing their game plan or they're going kind of too hard in certain areas.
Yeah, so the last one is knowing the matchup, and this is a very, very broad term, and there's a lot of different things you can do to improve matchup knowledge. I'm going to be using a very specific example from the Flesh and Blood UK Battle Hardened from day one, where I'm able to kind of illustrate what that means. And by knowing the matchup, I specifically mean that for the hero you choose to play, whether you're choosing to kind of do the one trick strategy that I kind of alluded to in the beginner to intermediate video, where you're putting a lot of reps into your particular hero, is knowing all your matchups where your win con is very easily established throughout the game. You're building your deck and your sideboard accordingly to viably combat the matchups you're expecting to face, either in your local meta, global meta, what have you, right? And so in this particular matchup, we have Oldham versus Bravo. I know we're going ham on the Guardian examples here. It's just because it just happens to be a lot of what we're seeing here, where there's very high level critical thinking. Not that a Fire Art of War turn doesn't have high level critical thinking, but it's just a little bit different in according to these games. So this is a Bravo versus Oldham game where there's a lot of very very crucial decision making points, very very key second, third cycle matchups, right? And so in this example here, I'm really highlighting the Oldhams here. So Oldham has a very heads up play block into a Nothos. It seems kind of like, why does this really matter, right? Like blocking a Nothos. The game is getting to the later stages, probably past the midpoint. Your life totals are less than 15 or so, and then big dominated attacks are coming through, especially on the Bravo side, but also like a Macho Grande could come out on the Oldham side, right? So for this Anothos, Oldham knows that Bravo's best chance of winning is a big dominated attack when Oldham is lower health. The secondary clause is probably pummel, depending on how many pummels they have left in the deck. But the dominate is kind of like for sure. Like you dominate something, it comes in and it'll kill you if you can't block it, right? So at this stage of the game, Oldham has a slight health lead when taking the armor into account. We'll have a deck size advantage also. Probably not super big. Bravo is pretty good at recycling cards. So very, very close in general. A less experienced or possibly a less patient Guardian player might have seen the Spinal Crush or the Crush of the Week. So the hand is a red Spinal Crush. Well, it comes in red Crush of the Week, and then a blue Imposing Visage and a blue Autumn's Touch, right? So in this particular case, they might have seen the Spinal or the Crush of the Week and wanted to either block 3 and then take 3 damage from the Anothos to send 9 back. So pitching 2 blues for the Spinal, essentially blocking with the Crush of the Week. Or block with the Spinal Imposing, pitch the Autumn's Touch, and attack with the Crush of the Week instead, right? In this particular case, I believe Oldham took the best line, which is simply to full block and pitch Autumn's Touch Spinal to swing back in for 6. And we call these kind of micro advantages, right? So making small decisions throughout the game that can culminate in a better end state, or in some cases, just a straight up lead. So the reason why I kind of consider this the best play on the Oldham side is first you pitch the most ideal blue in Autumn's Touch, because you also could have pitched Imposing Visage. They both block for the same value. However, this is an Earth card. And so because it's an Earth card, not only does it block for 3, but you can use it for an Oldham D-React later in the game, especially into a dominated attack, which Bravo is very much threatening to try to finish the game. So you get to pitch that Autumn's Touch for later. As your deck gets thinner, the chances of you drawing it when you need it are higher, right? And then essentially it just gives you 2 extra block on that big critical attack. The second is that even if you were to take another 3 from the Nothos to swing in Spinal, Tunic is only on 2, meaning that there's no real threat of like an Arsenal pummel to come in for lethal, right? Because you'd only have 1 floating after you've paid 2 blues for the Spinal. The on hit doesn't really matter for Bravo, where you could just throw 1 card or no cards and come back with a big dominant attack to shift the tempo. If Oldham can't respond to effectively, that the entire game could be flipped on its side, right? So there's no point in taking the extra 3 where the lower health total benefits Bravo a little bit more because of the innate dominant ability for an on hit that doesn't do anything in Spinal Crush. Therefore, what the Oldham player did is pitch Spinal Crush for later for a more efficient threat and another 3 block, of course, that he can later combine with a pummel if he sees fit. And so he's able to assess that these are the correct cards to block with, and I don't need to be taking 3 damage to send an extra 3 damage back. And those are the kind of micro advantages you tend to learn by playing that matchup again and again and again, getting your reps in the matchup and knowing the matchup. Importantly, that this is Bravo's main win con. I should really try to avoid taking damage rather than if you're playing an aggro matchup, you're probably going to take that extra 3 damage to send a spinal crush back because it actually impairs their turn. Because that is their win con is possibly to go wide, something like a Phi or a Briar. So with that, hopefully a combination of these videos or one or the other for the beginner to intermediate to advanced have maybe put some thoughts in your head. Maybe consider playing more of the game to elevate your kind of skill, your status, what have you. And with that, from everyone at Spark of Genius, and I mean mainly me and Rob, I wish you the best in your pro. We wish you the best in your ProQuest season. And with that, if you like this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe as well, of course, from wherever you're watching in the world. Have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.